introduction to the text itself. Plato's Parmenides. Oh, no, you should notice the ancient scroll. Just like Socrates found. This is translated by a great man, Juan, and his wife, Maria Balboa. We talked about the significance of logos, of certain key words, many of which are only in the Greek. This translation is the greatest of all of them in that those keywords are translated accurately, following the lead of Dr. Pierre Grimes, who is one of the greatest philosophers up there with Socrates. Living, he's about 99 years old. He is amazing. He also developed the systematic approach of philosophical midwifery to address the pathologos. He's written a book about it. Philosophical Midwifery, a new paradigm of understanding human problems. It has been verified scientifically, empirically, as I think the only form of psychotherapy that actually works in addressing and solving human problems. And as we go through philosophy, we'll understand why that has to be the case. If there is a logos, if there is the understanding, not a understanding, then of course there would be one system of understanding the patterns of our problems, just as there is the logos that we're attempting to discover. And that activity is, again, putting aside our personal pathologos, that which causes interpretation from missing what's there, or adding or projecting what's not there, to discover the logos. So, this text has direction from a great philosopher who himself participates in the logos at a high level, and it has the Greek terms underneath the English. So if there is a turning point, or if our quest or this level hinges on a certain key word, we can look at the Greek and we can go into see for ourselves what exactly it means. One of the problems that humanity has so far had with philosophy is the translators. The translators of Plato's dialogues grew up in certain key times where the church, for instance, had a very strong sway, didn't like ideas that challenged their way of thinking. Fortunately, we're not so, most of us don't live under such a tyrannical rule, and we can read things as they are. We don't have to deal with the pathologos counterattacks from such people. But those authors themselves might not have had a high level of understanding. They might have projected a little bit. They might have missed some keywords themselves. Fortunately, this text, with the lead of Pierre Grimes, can avoid a lot of those mistakes, and with the Greek, we can see it for ourselves. And so that's why this is one of the greatest translations of Plato's dialogues and can awaken us from the problems that held back previous generations. So thank you, Juan, and thank you, Dr. Grimes. And thank you, Maria, of course. Prologue. Let's get into it. Cephalus is our first character. If anybody has read another great work by Plato, The Republic, they may recognize this guy, or recognize the name. But here we go, Cephalus. Immediately after we arrived at Athens from Clazomenae, the place of our abode, we happened to meet with Adimantos and Glaucon at the place of the assembly, the agora. And Adimantos, taking me by the hand, said, "Welcome, O Cephalus, and if there is anything you need of those things that we have here of which we are able to provide, please ask. Then on the one hand, I am certainly here indeed for this very purpose, as being in need of your help." Adimantos, "Please tell us your need." I'm going to pause there. Already, we have a lot of clues that we want to look for as philosophical adventurers. One aspect of the Logos is whole and part. What does that mean? Well, in a good text, let's say in reality itself, you might have noticed that there are certain patterns in the parts, in how a flower comes to bloom, in the patterns it follows, in its patterns of its petals. Those patterns reflected in things like the galaxy, how the spirals of the galaxy are situated, the patterns there. This symmetry or likeness in the whole, between the whole and the parts, is something in the structure, in the paradigm of reality. And if the reality is created by and through the Logos, then it's part of the Logos. We are learning about the Logos, and this is a text that is written from the Logos. So what does that mean? We're looking for key parts. That's where the clues are. Right, in a video, I'm going to use video games as an analogy because I love video games. They're awesome. Now, in a video game, there'll be something that stands out, like a statue out of place. A part that doesn't fit with the rest of the whole, that will be significant, that you look to and go, oh, there's something to look, there's a clue there. Right? Or there might be certain key parts of the environment. There is a castle over there. Oh, that's a key part of this environment. There's probably something significant there that I need to have a look at. This is in the Logos as well. So the introduction, the opening paragraph, the opening sentence, even the opening word may contain significant clues for us to unpack the whole, part and whole. So we're really starting like on fire here, because the opening of the text may contain something significant for us to see the whole of the text. Key clues. Now, we haven't read the whole text yet, so we might not know we might not know the significance of this gem that we discovered under the statue until later on in the game, when we discover, oh, there's a picture with 3 gems missing its 4th. Oh, this is where the gem goes. Similarly with this, we might not know the significance of these keywords or these key sentences yet, but like a good adventurer, we take them, we turn them into a question. The question is something that's yours, you can hold on to, you can nurture. You can realize you can ask people this question, practice it. Hey, maybe even asking, like in a video game, oh, I'm going to the town crier and asking him this question about this item I found, and he'll give me some information. Same thing here. Turn it into a question. Ask people who are in the game. Ask people who think that they know about this sort of stuff. See what they give you. This is the philosophical quest. You might even be able to polish up your questions. I can ask the same question with fewer words. I can repeat it. I can hold on to it. Sometimes I even think about this question without having distractions. That puts me in an interesting, focused state of mind. Oh, your question can have an effect on your state of consciousness. Interesting, right? Let's do it here. What's the first word? Immediately. What is the significance of immediately? How would immediately relate to the Logos and our own state of consciousness? How will it relate to our understanding or our knowledge, nous? Do our insights come immediately? How do we awaken all at once? These are questions. So immediately is the first word. We arrived. Is that significant? Maybe. In the Greek, it's the second word. Again, this is the significance of having the Greek here. the second word, we arrived. Interesting. How does one arrive? Do you have to have a goal to be able to arrive there? Do you have to go on a journey? Are we going on a journey into this great text? Are we looking to arrive somewhere? We arrived. And when we get there, will it be immediate? Add these into your inventory and let's move on. Let's proceed unto the quest. We arrived at Athens. Athens! I heard about Athens. That's where Socrates lived. That's where the school of philosophy lived. What does Athens represent? Here is another feature of the Logos that we want to become aware of. If philosophy involves puzzles, then there has to be a way of communicating puzzles to the reader. It wouldn't be much of a quest. It wouldn't be much of a video game if the video game started with, here are all the answers to all of this, here are all of the answers to all of the puzzles, and by the way, here's the final credits. Like, well, what about me? That was the quickest video game I've ever played. Well, if the movie starts with the Lord of the Rings characters dancing around celebrating Frodo's achievement. Well, hang on a second. What about the journey? He just finished without... Wouldn't be much of a movie, wouldn't be much of a game. So there's a way in which puzzles are going to be communicated to us. That is part of the Logos itself. So we're discovering puzzles, but we're also discovering how do we discover puzzles. One of the ways is through narrative, sometimes called mythology, representing as a metaphor or an analogy certain key ideas with other things that can be put into a story. If that's happening, then we can recognize key ideas. Oh, Athens, that's a key place. Did Plato just throw it in there because he couldn't think of anything else? Or was there a meaning behind what he wrote? Well, if you're ever asking yourself that question, whether there's a meaning behind this Logos, I think it's a safe bet to say there might be. There's a quote that I quite like. Plato wasn't paid by the word. It's unlikely that he threw something in just for the sake of it, or to get more dollars. There'll probably be a reason why he picked this here. Part of the Logos is realizing everything is in its intended place. Seeing that as part of the philosophical idea of justice. Everything where it should be in its right place, for its right purpose. Now, it might be hard to see that. And to see that, you might have to start being confused and puzzled. It might seem unjust. It might seem irrational. It might seem out of place. But that's okay. That's the start. You don't start off having thrown the ring into Mordor. You don't start off having defeated the final boss. You start off puzzled. You start off not knowing. You start off needing to level up. So what does Athens mean? This recognition that narrative or mythology is a way of giving us one half of an analogy, one half of a metaphor. And if it's for a reason, if it's part of justice, if there is a way of seeing why it fits, then our job is to find the other half of that equation. In other words, what does Athens represent? Sometimes the author will give us a clue. He'll say, here is Athens, here is this other place, here is this other place. By the way, one of these places refers to this. You solve the other one. Just like in a video game, you might come across a painting which has 3 gems in the painting, but it's got one hole missing. You know, your job is to finish the analogy, finish the metaphor, find the other gem and put it in its right place. That's what we're doing here. Only it's the noblest quest. It's the noblest game. So we want to know, what the hell does Athens refer to? We might not know yet. Hey, we might not even know after we've read the book once, or twice, or 3 times. We might even have to read a few different Plato's texts. Maybe he sprinkles in clues throughout his books. Maybe. But now it goes into our bag. We're leveling up as adventurers with this keyword in our bag. What does Athens represent? Anyway, we can start off with a few assumptions. If it's where Socrates hung out, if it's where Socrates did his talking to people about philosophy, if it's where the academy at Athens was made, maybe it refers to something quite high. Maybe. We're developing a hypothesis. That's part of the game. Right, developing a hypothesis. A likely explanation that seems to be rational and unify key ideas. You don't know. Hypotheses and understanding is not the same as knowledge. Hypothesis, take that with you. We arrived at Athens from Clazomenaea. Same question, what does that represent? The place of our abode. So Cephalus lived somewhere other than Athens. What does that say about his state of mind if Athens is something high? Let's keep going. We happened to meet with Adamantos and Glaucon. Who are these two? Well, historically, they are Plato, the author's brothers. At the place of the assembly, the agora. What happened at the agora? So people met up. One of the nicknames Socrates had was Gadfly. He would hang around the agora and ask questions of powerful people, like a powerful horse. Now, a horse is a powerful animal, and it has these little flies, gadflies, that would annoy it, poke it on the butt, and it'd have to swish it away with his tail. Now, one of Socrates' nicknames was because he was asking these annoying questions that would wake up these big, powerful characters in the society, generals and politicians and so forth. They called him a gadfly. You're a little powerless, seemingly powerless gnat, annoying these big, powerful horses, but you do seem to affect us in some way. It happened in the agora. So this is where he's meeting them. Now, again, I'm sharing some things that I've learned, some things from my bag, my adventures inventory. You can do your own. You can research your own. What happened at the agora? What happened in ancient Greece? Check out some cool YouTube videos about it. Read some books about it. Read some other texts about it. You'll start to make connections. And when you start to make connections and you'll start to see, oh, there's some cool symmetry happening here. You might start to recognize some beauty in that connection. These are the insights we're after. You're making it your own. So don't take mine just on opinion or belief. It's not about belief. I'm sharing some things that I've seen, but you might not see them. If you don't, you can ask questions, or you can go on your own quest to find those connections for yourself. It's all about developing your own understanding, your own seeing. Let's move on. Happened to meet Adamantos and Glaucon at the assembly, and Adamantos, taking me by the hand, said, "Welcome, O Cephalus. If there's anything you need." Adamantos took him by the hand. Is that significant? Maybe yes. Adamantos took him by the hand. If Cephalus is someone coming from a place of ignorance, and Adamantos is someone hanging out at the agora, what's the significance of Adamantos reaching down to where he is and grabbing him? Is that part of the philosophical game? If you left level 1 of a cave as an adventurer in a game, and you see other adventurers struggling to get out, would you reach your hand down and grab them to help them? If there's anything you need, would you ask them if they need anything? Is that part of giving help? Of we have here, we are able to provide if we're able to. Please ask. Is asking something significant? Putting words on what we need with somebody else in philosophy. Didn't we talk about that earlier? The part of the philosophical quest is putting words on our insights and our understanding and sharing them with other adventurers? Hey, not just things you've seen, but things you need, things you're puzzled about, things you still have as questions. Please ask. Interesting. This is just the first paragraph. Wow, how rich, right? What a wonderful text. Let's keep going. Cephalus. Then on one hand, I am certainly here indeed for this very purpose. Purpose. We talked about purpose, didn't we? As being in need of your help. Now, this sentence highlights something significant about the translation. Alto. This is a key word. Can I zoom in? Oh, I can. Alto. Oh, alto. It's under the word purpose, but alto probably refers to, in the Greek, I. So obviously Greek follows a different structure to English. I. What does alto mean in Greek? This is one of the greatest quests. What exactly does alto mean? It's a key word, that's why it's in purple. That's why one helped us out a little bit and put it in. One, the translator, put it in purple for us. Altos, one of the meanings of altos is self. We mentioned earlier that the goal of philosophy for the ancient Greeks is to know thyself, the highest self. That's the purpose for them. And even in the experience of the key ideas like the beauty, the justice, and how overwhelmingly blissful they may be, they ask the question, what is the self having that experience? Here it is, early on, altos. Part of our quest is to figure out what exactly altos means and the significance of it. So here's an instance. Into the bag it goes. Onward. Self is here indeed for this very purpose. Now, there are three common ways of using the word self. This is, I think, another quality unique to the Greek language that isn't in a lot of languages. Some words have levels of significance. Just as we talked about the logos having its shadow in a lower realm of the pathologos, our ignorance, destiny having its negative shadow and fate. Same thing, same principles, but on different levels. We talked about the flower having a pattern. That's a different level of the cosmos, the galaxies, having similar spirals that you might see in a flower or in a shell or something like that. That same pattern of likeness and reflection through many levels is present in the word alto. Alto is Greek for self. Tragically, one of the words never translated into English up until this translation. Why? Well, if self is one of the highest goals in our destiny, then wouldn't it also trigger one of the highest blocks? If self is close to the last level of philosophy, wouldn't it have the greatest boss to defeat? So the translators would be hit with their blocks. Or cultural problems. Hey, there might be certain people in power who think it's their job to tell you what the self is. And they don't want you to talk about it for yourself. Famously, we knew the Christian Bible wasn't translated into a language people could read for hundreds and hundreds of years. We know this. This is something that's significant about this word. We can reawaken our philosophical heritage with this translation and as adventurers on this quest. Significantly with this word alto. So, it has layers of reflection through different levels of reality. It has a common one that refers to the subject, it, like sometimes it's used as to refer to, I went on a horse and it ran very fast. Sometimes they'll use the word alto referring to it, the subject. So that's kind of the lowest. The particular. the physical example, you might say. The next level, so if this is the lesser, the greater reading of altos is something called the honorific. That means take the thing and push it up to its highest possible thing. So in the story of the Achilles in the Iliad, they would say things like, Achilles had a special shield with him made by a god and had the special inscription. He wielded the self-shield to indicate this is the highest possible, the excellence of shieldness itself. Like somebody in a flow state, you might say, I was on fire, or I was in the zone. I was in self, in the honorific sense. That's the greater reading. Ooh, thumbs up. Okay, fireworks. Yeah, honorific. Hey, maybe we do this for honorific, and it gives us fireworks if we get the honorific reading, and we do this. So lesser and greater, and then the highest possible reading. Of self, it's the one self. The self that is beyond all, the self that is you at your highest possible. Not your honorific performing at pure excellence, but even before the functioning through excellence, what is the self? And for the Greeks, there's a question, is the self the highest, beyond even beauty, beyond even justice? Because if there is an experience of the beauty, wouldn't there be something experiencing it? So those are the three levels, the particular, the honorific, and the ultimate. That's contained in this word, altos, self. Which means as we come across this, there are many ways of reading this passage, all of which should fit. This is the well-crafted thing. Like you might have read a book or watched a movie. Let's take an interesting movie like Fight Club, for example. Fight Club, you have a way of reading it just the way it's presented. That there are these two people going through this journey. But then when you realize the twist, you go back and you realize, oh, there's a higher way of reading it where this character actually represented this thing for this person. He was this aspect of his psyche. So there is a higher reading. But, interestingly, both make sense on the level they're on. This is something that we can discover about the Logos. If there are different levels of reality that we move through as adventurers on the philosophical quest, we're not saying one is completely illusory. It has its own kind of reality, true for that level. It has its own... Once you transcend it, of course, it lacks its truthiness. It lacks its significance from a higher level. Once you leave level one, you look back and you're, okay, that wasn't the whole of everything. There's this whole world outside the cave, right? And the things I saw in the cave were just really shadows from objects in the outside world casting a shadow in. I tried to fight those shadows thinking they were real, but actually, now those shadows have a kind of existence. So there'll be a way of reading it with each of them. Keep that in mind. Isn't this fun? Oh, it's so good. It's like the best video game ever crafted, hundreds of years before video games. Here we go. On the one hand, self is here indeed for this very purpose, as being in need of your help. Ooh, sounds like someone has a question. What happens when you have a question? You're on a quest. Please tell us, Adamentos, please tell us your need. Now, here we have, can I highlight this? Yes. Let's make it yellow. Tell us. Another benefit of having the Greek is we can look at the Greek and we can see the word legoi, Legoi, derived from logos. So we're after the Logos. Something about Logos also involves communication in some way. Putting words on your quest with fellow adventurers is part of the Logos, maybe. Maybe. Take it with you. Put it in your bag. And onward we go. So that was just the first. Here, these are called the Cephalus numbers. It's a way of, because there are different translations that translate it slightly differently in different books, we needed a way of pointing to certain sections, no matter what book you're reading, no matter what text or translation you're reading. So it's a way of pointing to those different sections, like a contents page, because you might have like the Parmenides in with other books, so it's like page 1000. You know, you don't want to say, oh, on page 1000, Socrates. On Cephalus number 126a, we have the introduction. That's what this is. That's the Cephalus number. So, this is all the introduction. We've learned a lot. We've got a lot in our bag. A lot of questions. So we're going to take a pause while I get some coffee. And we're going to come back and take on the next paragraph. Please stick around. And we're back. We're back to tackle the second paragraph of Plato's Parmenides. Let's get into it. Cephalus, what was your maternal brother's name? For I do not remember. For all that time he was a child when I came here. For at that time he was a child when I came here before to the assembly from Plasomenia. But since that time, a great length of time has already taken place. Lots and lots and lots here. Of course. I'm just removing some highlights. He's asking a question about Adeimantus's brother. What's his name? On his mother's side. What's the significance of that? I'm not sure yet. That's a question. Why ask that question? He doesn't remember. Now, what does remembering play significantly for the Greeks? Well, one of the key distinctions, I'm going to share something with you, between how we understand learning today and how they understood learning was, nowadays we think of learning as piling facts into a mind of a student, cramming it in their brain, giving them tests to make sure it's crammed in there, and then you go to another class and you cram more facts in over and over. They didn't understand learning the same way. For them, learning was preparing of the student's mind to remember that which we already know at some level in our soul and in our mind. Remembering as a theory of learning. Now, does that play a role here? He doesn't remember something and he wants to. Is that a foreshadowing? Is it something that might allude to what's to follow? Maybe. Let's take it with us. Into our adventurer's sack it goes. For at that time he was a child when I came here before to the assembly. So he's been here before. What happened? What happened between then and now for this man? So now we're building out the character. Plato is leaving us clues through the narrative about this character. We have to be Sherlock Holmes. Have you ever played the Sherlock Holmes video games? They're great. Have you ever seen the Sherlock Holmes TV series with Benedict Cumberbatch? Try saying that 3 times fast. Benedict Cumberbatch. They are fantastic. We need to have that state of mind and function that way. We're building a characterization of this character. Just like Sherlock Holmes would take notes to I think there's a name for that. When you get clues and you put them together to develop an understanding of a certain person. We're doing the same thing for Cephalus. So we're going to have our Sherlock Holmes caps on. I have mine. He has been here before, but a great length of time has already taken place. Why hasn't he come back sooner? What happened in that length of time that he does not remember something significant? Interesting. What has Cephalus been up to? But his father's name was Prolampes. Okay. But his father's name was Prolampes, I believe, says Cephalus to Adimantos. Quite so. Cephalus says, to be sure, but what was his name? Again, we have highlighted in the purple for us from 1. Altos. What was self-name? Asking a question about self. Why is that significant? Adimantos replies, Antiphon. Antiphon was my brother on my mother's side. Brother of my mother. But what is it that you need to most inquire after? Need most to inquire after? What kind of a question is that to ask someone? What is your highest need that you have a question about? Let's keep going. Cephalus says, are you aware that these fellow citizens of mine are quite philosophical? Wow! And have heard this very Antiphon was frequently present with one Pythagoras. Okay, lots of meat there, right? He has citizens that are quite philosophical. Great that they're philosophical. But what role is quite playing here? How quite? What does quite mean? Not completely, is it? Significant? Write that down. This Cephalus fellow has people who are quite philosophical, but they have heard that this very Antiphon, Adimantos' brother from his mother, was frequently present with one Pythagoras, the companion of Zeno. Bum, bum, bum. I'm going to have to get a sound effect here when certain key characters enter the fray. Zeno. Wow. That's the area boss, right? Zeno is a big name. It's Parmenides' student. Pythagoras hung around, was a companion with. Companion might be significant for the Greeks. Maybe you'll read another Platonic text which shows the significance of this word here. But let's keep going. He was a friend of Zeno. And he treasured in his memory the Logos. Wow. The Logos which Socrates, Zeno, and Parmenides. Wow, the three big names themselves. Socrates, the young student, Zeno, the middle guy, the apprentice of Parmenides, and Parmenides as the master. Pythagoras treasured in his memory the Logos which these three fellows had with each other at that time. Wow, what does that say about our friend Pythagoras? Let's highlight this guy. He's up to something interesting. If he's treasuring, what would it mean if you treasured something in your memory? What would you do with it? If you treasured something, well, would you tell your friends about it? Would you find people who share the same interests and talk to them about it? Interesting. Sounds like we have a fellow adventurer. A friend of ours, we could say, Pythagoras. If that's what he's doing with his memory of what? The Logos. Wow. We have met a friend already. We've ventured into the cave of this video game and we've come across a friend in there. We've found another character that we can relate to and add to our party maybe. someone who can help us, someone on our side. Again, logos, what we're after, right? Thankfully, one has translated discourses and logos. This is something that one does. He'll give a regular English translation for readers to read it as it is, who might not be familiar with the key words. They might not have understood what it means to be discovering the logos, to be a philosophical adventurer, but they still want to read it. So he'll put in both. He's treasured the discourses. But for us, he helped us out. The logos, he put in both. Good for one. Thank you, one. And we can see the Greek underneath. And he went out of his way to put it in purple for us so we don't miss it. All right. So we have some friends who have walked this path, who have left some clues along the journey that we're walking. Pythagoras, the companion of Zeno, he treasured in his memory the logos which Socrates and Zeno and Parmenides had with each other at that time. What a conversation that must have been! Socrates, who we today call the father of Western thought, the greatest philosopher that we know about. Parmenides, the greatest philosopher people don't know about, which is why this book, the Parmenides, is often called the greatest book never read, and for good reason that we'll discover later. Two big names and some guy in the middle. Another thing that we can look out for in the logos that put into our sack: mean analogies. What's a mean analogy? Well, for something to go from one person, let's say Parmenides, to Socrates, the way in which it can be transferred happens through something. Like a teaching, let's say. Let's say you're a guitar teacher and you have a student. Well, you are passing on the teachings you learned from your guitar teacher. So you are the middle or the mean in a mean analogy. So your student gets the teachings from your teacher through you. Why is that significant? Well, we talked about the significance of analogy as communicating a logos. The town Athens is like something and represents it. That's a two-term analogy. We talked about this same two terms of the positive and its reflection in the negative, the logos and the pathologos, destiny and fate. That's one of the structures within the logos, these two terms reflecting each other through likeness. Another structure that we can look for in the logos is a three-term analogy. Look for triads. Triads are key in the logos, and you'll see them in Plato's thought. What does that mean? Well, you've developed a new skill now. Well, maybe not a skill, but there's an ability that you have as a character now that you have the, let's say you've developed a spell. The spell of looking for triads. Now as you go along, like let's say a character in a video game might have the ability to see traps that the other characters don't have. They'll walk past a bush and they won't notice anything, but the one with the ability to see traps will notice it. It'll stick out to him. He knows what to look for. Oh, those leaves are off. Oh, that smells like oil. Maybe there's a fire trap there. He knows what to look for and he'll see it and he can benefit from seeing it. So too, we have the sight of the triad. We have triad sight now. So add that to your ability, triad sight. What does that mean? When you're reading the text, when you're discovering the logos through a logos text like this one, you might notice a triad. It'll stand out to you. But it might not stand out to other people. But you can note, oh, there's a trap there, or there's a clue there, or there's a message there, or there's something being conveyed here that we have to solve as adventurers. Triad sight. So you've got duad sight with the positive and its negative reflection, destiny and fate. Now you add to that triad sight. Using our triad sight, we can discover, Socrates, Zeno, and Parmenides, that sounds like a triad. And of all the triads that have existed in human history, this seems like one hell of a triad. Up there with the greatest, even. Anyway, given that it is one hell of a triad and it involves the logos, could there be... would it make sense why this would be a memory treasured for this person? Wouldn't you treasure a memory? let's say you're a basketball player and one day you came across, who should we say? You came across Dr. J, Michael Jordan, and LeBron James having a conversation with each other. If it was meaningful to you as a basketball player, maybe that conversation would be something you would treasure in your memory. And anyone that you know that loves basketball the way you do, you talk to them about it. So you don't lose that memory. So you keep that information and you can share it and benefit from it. That's the game we're on as philosophers. So, Antiphon, Adeimantos' brother from his mother, hung out with Pythagoras, and he hung out with Zeno, and he treasured the memory of these three guys. Treasured in his memory the logos which Socrates, Zeno, and Parmenides had with each other at the time, having been often heard from Pythagoras. Now, let's go over to our board. This is something interesting. This is a clue we're getting from our author Plato. This isn't a direct account of what Socrates said to... Are you away? What's going on? Oh. That Socrates had with Zeno and Parmenides. Their logos. We're not just hearing their logos. We're hearing it through someone who was there. Who was that? Pythagoras? Pythagoras. Pythagoras. Heard this. Are we hearing it from Pythagoras? No. Not even hearing it from this guy. He told it, treasured it in his memory, so probably talked about it a lot with someone we know as Antiphon. Wow, what does that mean? We're getting it through someone. Remember how we just talked about mean analogies? Pythagoras is a kind of mean analogy, a transition point through which we're getting this conversation of Socrates, Zeno, and Parmenides. Interesting. How accurate do you think it would have been, considering he practiced it many, many times? He treasured it, likely he did, as he treasured it. Interesting. But we're not getting it from Antiphon. Cephalus asked, hey, who was your brother from a mother? Well, what was his name? Oh, that's Antiphon. Oh. So now we're hearing it from who are we talking to? Adeimantos. Adeimantos. But then Adeimantos, this whole story is a conversation between Adeimantos and who we're hearing it from. Cephalus. To us. So this is a chain chain of levels. The logos is going from these chaps to this chap, to this chap, to this chap, and then this is all being accounted to us from Cephalus. This is how we're getting this chain of progression. Is that significant? Why is it told that way? We don't know yet, but it's a hell of a question. What a way of talking about it. We're only a page in, and already we have this chain of events. Interesting? Curious? Puzzling? Would this be how you write a book? Would this be how you make a film? Or maybe if you're Christopher Nolan. But if you weren't Christopher Nolan, would you tell a story this way? I think even Christopher Nolan wouldn't have this many levels. He's a great film director. He did Memento and The Prestige. He did a lot of great things like that. Tenet. Let's keep going. So this is a question we got, right? Let's go back to the text. Adimantos says, "You speak the truth." Interesting. A-L-N-O-N. Alnon? What role does truth play? Adimantos is judging what he said using a key word that's one of the key logos words, truth. Truth is one of those things that we're after in philosophy. Is it interesting that he's using his philosophical treasures, what he has gained from philosophy, to judge? Is that part of philosophy? Interesting. What does that say about our friend Adimantos? Good questions. Let's keep going. Cephalus. Accordingly then, we are in need of hearing these discourses. Adimantos. Let's get rid of these highlights first, so people don't cheat. Oh, there's an altos down there. Let's get rid of that. There's a logos down here. That's why it's highlighted. No cheating. This is no difficult matter to accomplish, for the young man has made them. The young man, Pythagoras. Are we talking about Pythagoras? Yes, Pythagoras. The young man has... Wait. Antiphon was present with Pythagoras. This is no difficult matter, for the young man has made them the subject of quite focused attention. Focus, attention, big words. Using the qualifier quite. I wonder if that plays a role. And indeed, after that, so we talked about duad sight, or positive and reflection sight. Look for those pairs of duads. The greater and the reflected into the lesser. We talked about triad sight. One kind of sight you have to add to your skill set, or you can add to your skill set as a philosophical adventurer in this, the noblest game, is key term sight. Now, we talked about self having the lesser, the particular, and the honorific, the greater, and even the ultimate. The sorts of words that have a greater have a metaphysical expression. Not the particulars in the physical world, but also a metaphysical expression, like truth or beauty. These we call selfer terms. Selfer. You can apply the honorific self to them, so they're selfer terms. They're terms that surround and lead us to know thyself. A big philosophical quest. So we want self-aside. Self-aside. So think of yourself as Naruto, who has gotten the Rinnegan from Sasuke, and he's put it in. Now he can see self terms that stick out to him. Okay, if you know Naruto, that's awesome, and you'll think, oh, that's awesome, and you're so cool. If not, it's the idea of a certain kind of special sight that some characters have that allow them to function at a higher level. We want self-aside. What does that mean? As we read, we look out for key terms like truth. Why? Well, it tells us something about the character we're reading. We're Sherlock Holmes, right? Why is he talking about truth? What does that say about Adimantos and his level of development? How high of a character has he leveled up to? What's his logos? And also, Plato is writing it. So what does it say about Plato? So, self-aside, right? Quite focused attention. Now, these are significant terms as well that might jump out to us. If you're familiar with any sort of spirituality that also deals with consciousness, focused attention is a key part of meditation. Yogas. All of them, really. Whether you're counting your breath, or watching a candle, or repeating a saying like a mantra, all of them are methods of gaining quite focused attention on a particular thing. The goal being hopefully to transcend a state of consciousness to a higher one. That's the game we're in. But how is it different? Well, what we're developing a quite focused attention on is something that we treasure about the logos. Our questions. We don't have to be told by some guru, oh, this candle is important. Focus on it. That sounds boring to me. Or this mantra. Boring. But what if it's your question? You're interested in it. It's not artificial. It's from within. You're awakening your own quite focused attention. In this, a spiritual quest. Spiritual, why? Because the spiritual is another word that refers to that metaphysical realm. Why? Because it's not physical. If there's anything that can be there or can experience it, it's going to have to be something of your spirit, your soul, usia. That part of you that's there already and knows it, that we're trying to awaken and remember. That's basically what spiritual means. Of course, people use it in lots of different ways, but part of the logos is nailing down a good definition, an accurate definition. A definition that is true. Bum, bum, bum. So, with our self-aside, we've recognized some key ideas here. Quite focused attention. And indeed, after that, he now applies himself. He's using it very closely to equestrian affairs with his grandfather, who has the same name. What happened to our friend? Pythagoras was there with Zeno. Let's go to the board. Pythagoras was there with Zeno. And Antiphon was there as well. Antiphon had quite focused opinion. Oops. Hang on. But then he now applies himself to equestrian affairs. He's more interested in horses. Look at this wonderful horse. He says nay. These are horses. See? That's what he's interested in now. So put on our Sherlock Holmes hats and ask ourselves, what happened to this guy? Cephalus talked about not having returned to Athens for a long period of time and lost things in his memory. Now he's speaking of Antiphon, who used to treasure and have quite focused attention on the logos, the key logos, right? Big triad, Socrates, Zeno, and Parmenides. What happened? Now he's interested in horses. What happened to him? Something, right? Add these to a list of questions. Goodbye, we'll see. So he has kind of fallen from grace a little bit. Fallen from the Logos. And now he does things with his grandfather, who has come from the same name, has the same name. Why is that significant? Grandfather. Family tradition, perhaps? Maybe you've recognized in your own life that sometimes someone does well, but then they fall back into the old patterns that they got from their family. Traditions. Not in my house kind of thing. Maybe if you're watching this video, you're probably interested in philosophy yourself. Maybe you've come across people who said, philosophy? Do something with your hands, son. Daughter. Build a fence or go help me with the horses. None of this philosophy and logos mumbo jumbo. Right? You might have come across people like that. Or known people who had family members like that, and you're thinking, geez, I wish they weren't so loyal to their family who are against philosophy for some reason. This is part of the Logos as well. See if you can relate to these things. See if you can find an analogy to your own lives, a likeness. Can this be an allegory for things that you've had yourself? Can you recognize them? This is the applying. Antiphon is applying himself to equestrian affairs. But you want to apply, or us as philosophers want to apply ourselves to philosophy, these affairs. So see if you can relate to them. See if you can recognize an antiphon in your life. Maybe you can realize a grandpa antiphon in your life. Someone who encourages you to help with the practical affairs of the horses. More than getting into things like philosophy that you once treasured. Maybe. Let's keep going. He now applies himself closely to equestrian affairs with his grandfather, who has the same name. Then if we must, let us go to him, for he just now went home from here. For he lives very near in Melita, close by. Significant? I don't know. Let's keep going. Cephalus says, after we thus spoke, we proceeded to the house of Antiphon, and we found him at home, handing a bridle to a coppersmith to be prepared in a certain way. But as soon as the smith was gone and his brother had told him the reason for which we had arrived, he also recognized me, in consequence of my former journey to this place. And he greeted us kindly, and upon pleading with him to relate the Logos, at first he hesitated, for he said it was a great deal of work. But afterwards, he most certainly set it out in detail. Interesting. Therefore, Antiphon said indeed that Pythagoras spoke to say. Antiphon. Where are we? Antiphon. Set out in detail. Oops, wrong way. Set out in detail what Pythagoras spoke to say. Antiphon was recounting that. And these two guys are there to listen. And then there's us. Listening in. So, significant? It's a kind of a chain of progression of the Logos. Does that reflect reality itself? Interesting. If the Logos is a kind of rational, intelligible, knowable, understandable structure emanating through all of the different levels, are we seeing a likeness, an expression of that in this dialogue? Maybe. Who knows? Well, we can know if we get puzzled by these sorts of questions, if they're yours. If you're not asking this question, if it's just something that I'm asking, you're like, nah, I don't care about that, then just leave it. These have to be your questions. And that's the introduction. Wow. But, of course, there's a lot in this paragraph too, right? Antiphon is handing a bridle to someone else. The same theme of progression. Remember this? Similar sort of thing with his horse and his bridle. He's handing it down to a coppersmith. But he's asking it to be prepared in a certain way. Something specific. And who's in charge? Is Antiphon in charge? Is the coppersmith in charge? Who's the one who's the master of the other? Whose logos is being followed? Is he doing what the coppersmith says? Or is he asking for something? Is he in need of something that the coppersmith can give? What is this whole story about? Cephalus is in need of something that he thinks Adimantos, Plato's brother, can provide. See how the logos in a well-crafted text like this can be reflected on different levels. Isn't that interesting? But, of course, these people are not really interested in equestrian affairs. We told him the reason. Here we have, thank you, Juan, for highlighting it in purple. We have the word self. We told self the reason. Our reason's important, of course, but talking to the self. We told self why we had arrived. And what did he do? He recognized. Is recognition or remembering something? We talked about having duad sight and triad sight and selfless sight. Does that help us to recognize certain key ideas or key themes? He's recognizing here. In consequence of my former journey to this place, he's been here before. Is there a significance to returning to something significant? Is there a place that we want to return to over and over? Well, we talked about reading this book over and over. We talked about being a philosopher on a philosophical quest, returning over and over to the Logos, reflecting on the Logos, reading the same book over and over. Is that a place that we're returning to? Interesting. He greeted us kindly, but upon pleading with him to relate the Logos, at first he hesitated. Why? We're philosophers. Aren't we interested in the Logos? Don't we want to practice the Logos? If someone said, I know that you watched that video about the Parmenides. What did you see there? Would you be excited to say, this is what I saw? Would you be eager to share the Logos with someone who is interested? Why is this person hesitating? What's he up to? Put on your Sherlock Holmes hats. He said it was a great deal of work. Is this work? Is this fun? Is this play? Why would it be work? Isn't this interesting? Isn't this exciting? Isn't this the noblest quest? Isn't this what we're born for as philosophers? As true adventurers? Would you tell a born warrior not to swing his sword? Would you tell a born mage not to cast his fireball spell? Will you have to plead with him? It's a lot of work. Why? Why is it work to him? Questions. Take him with you. Afterwards, he most certainly set it out in detail. He not only laid it out, but in detail. What does that say about our character? If he's fallen into horse affairs, and now it's work, he can still set it out in detail. What does that mean? He still has a firm grasp of the Logos. What's going on with him? Therefore, Antiphon said indeed that his friend Pythagoras, who was there with Zeno, spoke to say, and now we open up the text. Now we're getting into the meat of things. Well, again, the Logos, what's one of our tools? Whole and part. The Logos that contains key ideas, self ideas, whole and part. This was the whole introduction. The part, immediately, first word. Arrived, after we arrived, second word. Key parts. Next word, Athens. Key part. All in the first sentence. The sentence is a key part. The first paragraph. What's your highest purpose? Tell us your need. Put it into words. I'm asking the self. So all the first paragraph. Can we see in this paragraph, this opening paragraph, something in this part that reflects the whole of the introduction? Have we seen in this interaction with Adimantos and about Antiphon going to his house? Cephalus here journeying to the place of Adimantos. Does that reflect them then going to see Antiphon? Did they go with a purpose? Was it something to do with the self? The self Logos, maybe? Something that they needed? Interesting. He was greeted pleasantly by Adimantos. He did hesitate, didn't he? But then he did set it out in detail. Is this reflected in the opening? Whole and parts. We're looking for whole and part connection. Likeness. What is that? Symmetry. Symmetry through time. That's beauty. Doesn't beauty involve symmetry? Is beauty one of those self terms? Well, yeah. Keep an eye out for these sort of things. Whole and part. So do we see in this opening paragraph something that reflects the whole opening introduction? Someone in need of something, needing to put it into words about the self, to a friend who's also a philosopher. Is that reflected through the whole of the introduction? And again, this goes from something that Cephalus is recounting to now we're hearing it was something that Cephalus was recounting to us. But now we're hearing Antiphon's recollection. Antiphon is telling the story from here on out. Antiphon is telling it to these two chaps. Okay. He's telling it to these two chaps. And that's what we're going to see for the rest of the text. Who is he talking about? These guys and their Logos. But how did he hear it? Through a mean. So here we see a really interesting mean now. There we are hearing the Logos of these guys through those guys are being communicated to Antiphon. We have a mean analogy happening. Bring out your triad glasses. There's a triad here. And then there's us down here, listening in. That's the opening to the Parmenides, sometimes called the greatest book never read. I hope you enjoyed. Next time we'll get into the next part of the text. I think we might see our star character Socrates make an appearance. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions, please leave them in the chat. or you can email me if you like to. This is a dialogue. This is a conversation. Share your questions. Right? We value questions on this quest. If you have some insights and understanding, please share them too. But we like questions most of all. Use those insights, use those understanding to develop a higher and higher question and share that. What are you puzzled about? I hope you enjoyed, and I hope you can join me on this philosophical quest as a fellow adventurer. The noblest quest in the noblest game to reach our highest goals and our destiny through the Logos. Thank you so much. See you next time.